Hello students. Today we will be starting the second theory of population growth, that is the theory of demographic transition. Okay? So the first point reads that the theory of demographic transition suggests that population growth and economic development of every societies are linked. So the pattern of population growth and the pattern of the development of the economy of every society is related. It is linked. Every society has a particular model of development that is related to the population growth. So we can see that the way the population is growing, it determines the economic development. And thirdly, hence population growth and economic development of societies are related to one another. So there is a close relationship, close link between population growth and economic development. So the theory of the theory of demographic transition, it gives us three stages of population growth. The first stage, it represents a pre-industrial society, a society before the Industrial Revolution, a primitive society. So in the first stage, it depicts a low population growth in society. So in a pre-industrial primitive society, the rate of growth of population is very low. The population itself is low. Although in the first stage, that is in the pre-industrial society, birth rate is high, that is the number of children being born every year is high. But the death rate, the number of people being dead every year, is also high. So when there is high birth rate as well as high death rate, the gap between the birth and the death rate is small. It's less. So eventually the population will also be less, and the growth of population will also be less, because although people are being born, although the birth rate is high, the death rate is high as well on the other side. So primitive society, a pre-industrial society, it is underdeveloped and technologically backward. For example, in countries like Africa, birth rate is high, as people aren't educated and are unaware of having small families. So birth rate is high. In the present century, people do not believe in having loads of children. At least the maximum may be 2, some go to 3, okay, and the minimum is 1, or some don't have any children at all. So because these people are being accustomed to a particular way of living, so they want a high standard of living, so they have less children or no children at all. But here in pre-industrial society, which is very underdeveloped, which is backward, people do not believe in all that. They are not educated, and they do not have any idea about the advantage regarding having small families, so they keep on reproducing. On the other hand, death rate is also high because there are no proper medical facilities, no hospitals, no better technologies available in the hospitals, so death rate is also high. And the people in this stage, they may give birth to more children because some of their children may die because of lack of proper medical facilities, so they give birth to more children to replace their dead children. So here, although the birth rate is high, death rate is also high, and the gap between the birth rate and the death rate is low, and the growth of population is also low. So here, the gap between the birth and the death rate is low, thus population growth is low. That is the first stage. Moving on to the second stage. This stage represents the industrial society. So this is a stage where a society is going through a revolution or a transition, where industries are being built, where new types of jobs are coming. So here what happens is, death rate is declining, whereas the birth rate remains at a high level. So in this stage, the rate of death taking place every year is declining. That is because due to the onset of the industrial revolutions, many new things have come up. Okay, so medical facilities became better, hospitals everywhere. So that is why the death rate began to decline, whereas the birth rate remains at a high level. So because people, they are accustomed to having reproduced a certain number of children, so that trait of people in the second stage is still not gone. So birth rate, it remains high. So the second stage is also called the stage of population explosion. So this stage is also called the stage of population explosion, where there is an extremely high rate of growth of population, because birth rate is increasing, birth rate is getting higher, whereas death rate is declining, right? Death rate is declining because of the availability of medical facilities. So this stage is called stage of population explosion. During this stage, economic development increases. So the development of economy is taking place in the second stage, in an industrial society. Agriculture, industrial activities, transport, communication, education, and income increases at this stage. So all positive things are happening in this stage for the people, for the economy. Like agriculture is getting better, it's increasing, industrial activities is increasing, means of transport and communication is increasing, people are being educated, people are earning more, medical facilities are becoming better, hence death rate is low. However, the birth rate remains high. So when there is a high birth rate and a low death rate, a declining death rate, the population is sure to explode. The population will obviously increase. So stage 2 is also known as stage of population explosion. Moving on to the last stage of demographic transition, which reads, this stage represents the post-industrial or a developed society. So the first stage was represented by an underdeveloped society. Second stage, a developing society, and the third stage is a developed society. So in this stage, birth rate begins to decline. So here birth rate begins to decline as people become more educated and they learn what it is like to have a small family and all the advantages that they can gain from there, and they become accustomed to a particular type of social environment where they want to maintain a particular standard of living. So birth rate begins to decline. The gap between the birth and the death rate is small again, like in the first stage. So how the gap between the birth and the death rate was low in the first stage, similarly in the second stage the gap between the birth and the death rate is small, because birth rate is declining, whereas death rate has been declining since the second stage. As a result, population grows at a slow or diminishing rate. So when there is small gap between the birth rate and the death rate, when the birth rate is low and the death rate is also low, population will grow at a slow pace or at a declining rate. So here in stage 3, birth rate declines as people attain high education, becomes practical, believes in having small families, etc. So all these social activities, social events, like getting more education, becoming rational, practical, and not emotional, having small families, etc., is influencing people to have small families too. And the idea of people having small family leads to low birth rate, right? So that is what happens in stage 3. People become more practical and there is less death rate, and because there is proper medical facilities, and as a result people did not have to reproduce again and again. Okay, so this is the theory of demographic transition and its 3 stages. Okay.